now going to talk to someone who left the Isle of Man after school, completed university successfully, and landed herself a job in the UK as a lawyer. Then, in 2015, she entered the London Marathon and hasn't stopped running since. In fact, Natalie Jackson left her job and joined forces with Olympic sprinter Emily Freeman to create Totally Runable, working with girls and female school staff, building confidence in sport. And we are delighted that Natalie is joining us on the phone now. And Natalie, quite a life upheaval, really, from what was presumably a really steady job with great prospects. Why did you decide to run from the law?
I never really thought about what I wanted to do with my life. I think it's probably sensible to say, and that sounds silly because obviously I was taking a lot of decisions and doing exams and things that would lead me down a path to end up being a lawyer. And I very definitely didn't hate being a lawyer. There were some bits about my job that I absolutely loved. I loved the people that I worked with. I loved the clients that I had. But I think I'd always felt that it wasn't quite me. And so when I met Emily and started doing some of the things that we now do, I think it was just much more me. And I think I very much found something I could be really passionate about and could make a difference in the world and change the world really in a really positive way. And so, yeah, it wasn't a sort of running from the law situation in that sense. But yeah, it was something I could dive into and wholeheartedly support. And yeah, I haven't looked back really.
So tell us how Totally Runnable works then. What sort of things do you do?
So we're based in Yorkshire, and so currently we work across West and South Yorkshire. We go in and out of schools, and a lot of what we do is using running as the tool to build girls' confidence, both in and out of sport. So we do a lot of work with primary age children, the top end of primary age, and the bottom end of secondary school. So sort of year 5, 6, 7, 8, so maybe age 10 to 13. Part of that really is around we hear a lot from secondary schools, from high schools, that by the end of year 8, a lot of girls are just not confident about sport anymore, are dropping out. By the time, so when we very first started the business, really the company, we were aiming to work with adult women who, for one reason or another, would say to either myself or Emily, "Oh, I wish I could run," based on the fact that I'd taken up running sort of out of nowhere, and Emily's, obviously her background was as a sprinter, so we would say, "Oh, why can't you run?" And actually a lot of it was down to confidence. It was saying, "Oh, I'm not a runner," or "Oh, I hated it at school," or that kind of thing. And so actually it was a confidence thing more than not knowing how physically to run. It was, the tools are out there if you want to start running. It's not difficult to find a couch to 5K online. So we started looking at, well, maybe why are women in particular that are speaking to us not confident enough to do that and not thinking of themselves as a runner, if you like. And actually, I remember the night before I ran that London Marathon. It was actually slightly earlier than you said. I actually ran the marathon in 2011, but I remember the night before the marathon. So obviously I was down in London. My mum and dad had come over, and I remember my dad saying to me, we'd gone to see a show in London, because that's what you do, isn't it, when you go to London? And my dad said, "Are you all right?" Just at half time in the show, and I burst into tears and said, "No, Dad, I'm not all right. I don't know what I'm doing." I'd got a place in the London Marathon. I'd done all that training to raise money for a local hospice, but I still wasn't confident about my own physical ability. And I think a lot of women will relate to that in particular. So we started working with adult women. That very quickly ended up in schools. And there is an issue around girls' confidence in sport that feeds into an issue around adult women's confidence in sport. And actually, I remember believing I was incapable of things that I now know I'm perfectly capable of. And it was running that taught me that. Emily's background is the complete opposite. She was confident about her sporting ability, but not necessarily as confident in everyday life. And so there's a lot that we've both learned from each other. There's a lot you can learn from running to put into the rest of your life, and from the rest of your life you can put into physical activity. And we just wanted to create something that would share that.
And I guess running is a great place to start, because really all you need are a pair of trainers and a little bit of self-motivation to get out the door.
Exactly. And sometimes that is the hardest part, getting out of the door, but actually you never feel worse after a run. And it is something that, although it doesn't necessarily feel natural all the time, certainly doesn't always feel natural to me, it is something that we are built for doing. There's been research, and there are 26 traits of human beings that mean we are evolved to be long-distance runners. We can run much longer distances than a lot of other mammals by how we're built. So actually, if you go about it the right way, although it's not necessarily easy, it's fairly simple, yeah.
Okay, so how did this move on to the See Sporty, Be Sporty campaign?
So we do a lot of work, as I say, in schools, and we quite often will be told the same thing, which is, oh, well, women's sport, you see a lot more, there's a lot more women's sport going on now, you see a lot more. And whilst I completely accept that is true, I'm a big football fan, I'm heavily involved, I'm a director of Barnsley Women's Football Club, I grew up a Man United fan. It didn't cross my mind when I grew up that I wasn't seeing women playing football, and now obviously we do see women playing football. So yes, it's definitely getting better. But there's a women's football show. I mean, the fact there is the women's football show on TV, I love, but it's on at sort of midnight on a Sunday night. So my argument was always, well, yes, it's getting better, but it's not equal. It's, by no means, it's nowhere near equal. And we're still sending a message to girls and to women in general that actually sport is something that women maybe don't do as much. So we started looking at, there was some research in 2014 around the No More Page 3 campaign, which was looking at the Sun newspaper and how the Sun portrays men and women. So they were looking at all the pictures across a 6-month period. They had all the pictures of men and women. They put them up on a wall. They were looking at how they were portraying men and women. And across those 6 months, they didn't find one picture of a woman playing sport. So we were just chatting in the office one day and saying, I wonder what it would be now if we looked, and not just at the Sun, all the sort of UK English national newspapers, high-level media, what is going on? And we thought that's a fairly easy way to just tell you what's happening. Is it getting better? Are we seeing more equality? And so we, one day a month for a year, just bought the top newspapers. So we had the 9 national newspapers, and we just tallied up how many pictures there were total, how many were of men, how many of women, how many pictures there were of sport, and how many of those sports pictures showed women playing sport. And it was fairly shocking, although maybe not surprising given what we do. But it was 2.9% of the pictures of sport showed women playing sport. So we had, I think, 3,107 total pictures of sport, and only 91 of those showed women. Which is fairly shocking. So we started a campaign really that we called See Sporty, Be Sporty, based on the fact that if girls and boys really, if girls and boys don't see women doing sport, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So how do girls know? No wonder we're losing them by the end of year 8. No wonder they don't, teenagers think that women don't get sweaty because you never see pictures of sports women getting sweaty or doing their sport. The other thing that was interesting around the photos were that actually the pictures of men in the sport were very different to pictures of women in the sport. You'd quite often see sports women in dresses or holding trophies or standing posing with a flag, whereas the male equivalent, you would see them doing the sport. So actually there is a subtle message going on there. There's a big difference between how we see men doing sport and how we see women doing sport. That's if we see them at all. So, the See Sporty, Be Sporty campaign really came out of that and was just calling for sport in the media to be more gender equal. So fairly simple but effective.
And how is it going then? Have you seen any improvements so far?
We've had some really interesting feedback. So we've had some really great support from high-level athletes. So we've had people like Hannah Cockcroft. She's a 10-time world champion, Paralympian. She has been giving us some brilliant support. We had people like Lizzie Arnold, the 2-time Olympic gold medalist. She's come on board and offered her support to it. We've had all kinds of people on high-level influencers and people, MPs. We've had Eva Carnero supporting it on Twitter. So we've had all kinds of really great support online with the social media things. We've also been featured in The Guardian. We were featured on The Guardian online and then The Observer a few weeks ago, and had some really interesting feedback from the Guardian's press office. The feedback that actually maybe there are other issues in there and it's women's sports teams who could do more to promote the sport that they're doing towards the media. So the discussion is starting and it's really great to be a part of that. But yeah, it's really just we're continuing the campaign, seeing what sort of support we can get. We've had, I think, nearly 1,500 people sign the petition on change.org. So yeah, there's definite interest in this and it'll be really interesting to see where we end up with it.
And I'm just curious because I know part of this is, as you've already said, is to raise the profile of PE at school and encourage girls to keep going. What was your experience at school like?
I think so. My view is, and I don't know, I'd love to speak to more Manx schools about it. I had a positive experience of PE and sport at school. I wasn't sporty, and I certainly don't think of myself as sporty. I played quite a bit of sport, but I remember being on the B team, the C team. I sat on the bench for things. But I remember it being a really positive experience. Looking back on it, I think there are elements of it that were very gendered. My favourite sport was football. There's video of me at 2 years old shouting at the telly cheering for Man United, but I didn't play football at school. I think we had a tournament once when I was 13. So it didn't cross my mind that I wasn't playing football. So I think there were definitely subtle messages going on there that I was taking on. I just didn't see myself as sporty. And like I said, by the time I was sort of in my late 20s taking up running, I didn't think it was something I could do. I think I only ended up following through with the marathon because it was something I was raising money for a family member that had died in a local hospice had looked after her. So, yeah, I think I didn't have massive amounts of confidence about my sporting ability. But my gut feeling is the Isle of Man does these things well. And actually that brings me on to a pledge that we're starting. We're starting a Girls in Sport pledge that's for schools. So I'm talking a lot to schools over here and schools in Yorkshire. I have spoken to a couple of Manx schools, and I'm really pleased to say they're coming on board. So Balcomine have said that they're up for doing it. We've got some primary schools interested. But the Girls in Sport pledge is really about schools that are either doing more for girls in sport or want to do more. So they're thinking about the messages that we're sending. So, for example, if you've got pictures up on the wall, we're not calling it the Year 7 football team and it's a picture of boys, and then the Year 7 girls football team. We're not making it a default male activity. It's things like that are sending messages to girls and boys around sport and sportiness. And actually, my gut feeling is the Isle of Man does this really well. So I want as many Manx schools as I can to get involved in the pledge. It's completely free to schools. So if anybody's listening that knows a Manx school that they think would be interested, please send them my way, because I would love that. I don't remember growing up in a school context and getting these messages that sport was a purely male activity. I think the Manx media, to me, has a really balanced approach to it. And I know that I see more pictures of, just from what I do, I know that I see more pictures of women doing sport in the Manx newspapers, for example. So I absolutely, my dad's been on at me to do some proper research around it, and I certainly will if I get a chance. I'd love to look at the newspapers and see what we are doing, because my gut feeling is we're doing it well.
Oh, brilliant. Natalie, it's lovely to talk to you this afternoon. Just name drop your dad.
Oh, Paul Crane.
Paul Crane.
My mum's Anne Crane as well. I must mention her as well, yeah.
Just very briefly, if people want to find out more about this, where can they go to?
So I'm always available by email. So my email is nat@totallyrunnable.com, but we have a website, it's totallyrunnable.com. On there is things, there's a whole school section about what we're doing, and within that there's a link to sign up for the Girls in Sport pledge. But the See Sporty, Be Sporty campaign, if you just Googled See Sporty, Be Sporty, you'd find all you need on there, and the pledge, which is on change.org. So that's change.org/P/See Sporty, Be Sporty.
Brilliant. Natalie, thank you so much for joining us on the phone this afternoon. We're going to put all the details on the Women's Day blog after the programme.